And good evening, everybody. We will get started in a few minutes. We're going to give folks the opportunity to come in. We'll get started at 6:05. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us this evening for the community meeting related to Lawrence Expressway and Benton. We are going to give folks just a few minutes to sign in, and we'll get started at 6:05. Good evening, everybody. My name is Consuelo Hernandez. Thank you again for joining us this evening. We are going to give folks about 3 more minutes before we get started. Sorry if you signed on early and listening to this for the 3rd time now. Good evening again, everybody. And for those of you with your hands raised, we will be starting shortly and we'll provide instructions on how we will be calling folks. Just going to give the community about another minute to log in and then we'll get started. Great, thank you, everybody. Again, my name is Consuelo Hernandez. I'm the director with the county's Office of Supportive Housing. Thank you for joining us this evening. This is the first community meeting, one of 3, that we will be co-hosting to discuss the opportunities at Lawrence Expressway and Benton. If you give me a moment, I will be sharing my screen. And if our team can just confirm that they are seeing the full slide. Yes, okay, perfect. Thank you so much. And it's advancing, correct? Wonderful. Thank you again, everybody. To run through the agenda very quickly, we'll do a quick round of introductions, give you some background about the potential opportunity, the need for interim housing with some specific details about the needs in Santa Clara, in the city of Santa Clara. We'll do an introduction about Life Moves, go over the site, talk about some prepared questions that we've heard from the community already, and then give you all the opportunity in a Q&A session to ask questions. Then we will have some time for closing remarks and next steps. And before we start, we'd like to establish a couple of ground rules so that we can do our very best to hear your Q&A for tonight. We encourage you to use the Q&A button to submit questions throughout the presentation and during the Q&A session. Please enter your name with your question if you are comfortable so that we can follow up with you if needed. We have members of the team monitoring the Q&A, so if you need assistance, you can type it into the Q&A. And just one last bit that during the Q&A session, we will also be giving those the opportunity that have their hands raised with the option to share within a few minutes their comments. Welcome and introductions. Again, my name is Consuelo Hernandez, Director of the Office of Supportive Housing. And joining me this evening as meeting hosts are representatives from Life Moves, staff from the City of Santa Clara. So if city staff, we are able to wave. And then we also have county staff that are on the line. At this time, we'd like to take a minute to recognize any elected officials that might be on. And we do see that we have Vice Mayor Jane, Councilmember Becker, Vice Mayor Park, and we also have maybe a representative from the city of Sunnyvale. If I'm missing any of the elected officials, apologies, we do have about 296 attendees. Feel free to raise your hand if you'd like to be acknowledged, or give us a holler and we will acknowledge your presence later on in the evening. The objectives of tonight's meeting is to share with the community the opportunity to expand interim housing options in Santa Clara. We want to provide context and background on the unhoused population in the city of Santa Clara. And we also want to create a space to answer questions and listen to the community. To provide a bit of background from the city's perspective, I'd like to hand it over to Adam Marcus, the housing manager for the city of Santa Clara.
Thanks, Consuelo. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for attending tonight. As some of you know, the City Council did host a study session back in 2021. And we were directed to look for sites for Home Key, which is a state program that's used to help cover the cost of building shelter and permanent supportive housing, as well as services. We also were directed to form a task force, which we did about the middle of last year. And we ran the task force for 6 months, and it just recently completed at the end of 2022. And that task force report was summarized earlier this year in January at a study session, and there was definitely a clear conclusion that there was a need for interim housing in Santa Clara, that people have to leave the city in order to access that type of housing. We also heard from the Planning Commission late last year when they were reviewing the Civic Center Drive project, that there was a desire or an interest in creating protocols such that neighbors and stakeholders that live in and around such projects are consulted and are kept in the loop, and that there's an integration of those developments into the community and such that they're good neighbors. So that was something that was suggested by the Planning Commission going forward. Next slide. As I mentioned at the task force, we had 6 meetings between April and October. We had 13 task force members, representatives from each of the city council districts. We also had representatives from different nonprofit and government partners, including the county's Office of Supportive Housing, to provide both perspectives of community as well as service providers. The meetings are still actually, they were filmed and recorded. They're still available on the city's website if you missed them. There's lots of great information there, and those were open to the public for attendance. Next slide. And here's a very quick summary of some of the high-level conclusions of some of the gaps and needs that were identified through that 6-month discussion, not just in the task force, but with people with lived experience, business owners, and other stakeholders. And of course, we're here tonight to talk about temporary housing and shelter, which is included here on the top row. Next slide. And with this, one of the challenges of building housing of any type, but especially affordable housing and interim housing, is finding a place to put it, finding land. And so with that, I'm going to hand this back to Consuelo, who can talk a little bit more about the site that we're looking at tonight.
Thanks, Adam. Thanks for that background. We wanted to make sure that you all in attendance were aware that the County Board of Supervisors also issued a very similar, we refer to them as a board referral direction in the case of the city council in Santa Clara. But the board asked us to look at and identify county-owned parcels for interim housing. One of the biggest challenges that we have as a community for both housing, permanent housing and interim housing, is being able to afford properties in the open market. And that often takes up a lot of the resources that we need in order to build and then operate future sites. And so one of the things that the board asked us to do is to look at specifically properties in the cities of Sunnyvale, Santa Clara, Campbell, Gilroy, and San Jose. And this is the property that county staff have identified in the city of Santa Clara. It is an underutilized parcel that could be made available for interim housing. Life Moves has expressed an interest in developing the site. And in a few minutes, we will hand the presentation over to Life Moves so that you all can learn a little bit about them, their service delivery model, and learn more about the services that they provide. But from our perspective, there is an alignment with what the city is wanting to do, and the direction that the board has given staff to partner with cities and identify properties for interim housing. We also wanted to take a little bit of time to give you context and background about what we're seeing in the community with the specific link to the city of Santa Clara. So this chart that you're seeing here is the biannual point in time count. For those of you that are not familiar, the county is required to prepare and conduct a biannual point in time count of all of the unsheltered and sheltered homeless individuals in our community. We need to do this in order to be eligible for resources that come through the federal government through what we refer to as a continuum of care funding. So here we've highlighted the city of Santa Clara, but you can see that between 2019 and 2022, we saw a 3% growth in the number of people that are homeless countywide. But in the city of Santa Clara specifically, we saw that growth by 35%. And why this is important is because, as Adam mentioned, one of the findings from the Unhoused Task Force is that there isn't enough housing and there isn't enough shelter for people that find themselves unsheltered, struggling to pay their rent, and which is why we're here tonight to share that information with you, and then break down a little bit more about who is homeless in Santa Clara. in the city of Santa Clara. And this, by the way, is the same information that was reported at the earlier city council meeting that Adam mentioned. So in calendar year 2021, what we saw in our county records is that 769 individuals affiliated with the city of Santa Clara were homeless. 57% of them identified with having a serious physical or mental health condition, and 50% of them were chronically homeless. And why this information is important for us is because it helps us in designing our programs and being able to educate the members of the public so that you can see, what are the needs in the community. In this instance, we're showing you here by age, the people that are homeless, and by household type, because again, this helps us in designing the programs that are responsive to that need. As a county, we have our Community Plan to End Homelessness 2020-2025. We are in our third or fourth year of implementation, and I won't get into all of the details. We're happy to provide you a link or set up a separate meeting to help guide your knowledge in our strategies, but we want to highlight strategy number 3. And strategy number 3 calls for the improvement of the quality of life for unsheltered individuals and create a healthy neighborhood for all. And within this strategy, we have a goal of doubling the number of shelter beds. And while we've made progress over the last 3 years, there is still a high need in our community. And you will see later this evening specifically where the gaps are, and it includes the city of Santa Clara. So with that, I will hand it over to Dr. Greenberg with Life Moves.
Thank you, Consuelo. Hi, I'm Brian Greenberg. I've been with Life Moves for about 17 years. It just so happens the background of this first slide is our new Redwood City initiative. It's also a county initiated program. It's also a modular construction building, and that will have 240 rooms, and with couples, it'll house about 270. But thanks for having me. I'm a psychologist. My background is in addiction treatment, and I am excited to talk to you about our services. Next slide, please. We are impact and results driven. We have partnerships with Palo Alto University, with Stanford University. We like to see ourselves as a nexus of research and practice, always evaluating what we do. And you can see on the slide, 1 in 6 of our beds has children. We're not going to be talking about families tonight, but we do serve upwards of 200 families experiencing homelessness each night. We've been around for about 40 years. And our model is about helping people identify and secure permanent exits from homelessness to secure housing. Next slide, please. In addition to this slide, we have a lot of outreach staff. We have a drop-in center across from Stanford, but that middle bar, we have traditionally operated congregate interim housing, where people sleep in kind of dormitory type settings. We've operated for many years, 10 of those facilities. We're going to be talking tonight about interim housing, kind of a modular village, but we also operate safe parking sites and kind of master leasing of motels, again, to kind of visibly and positively impact the unhoused situation and street homelessness. Next slide, please. So we operate throughout Silicon Valley and the peninsula. We're planning for and hoping to scale for growth. We believe that with facilities like this, geographically distributed, that we can have that visible and dramatic impact on homelessness. We've opened 2 sites in 2022. We've recently opened in Mountain View near the Costco, where we have 100 doors. And we're hoping to continue to grow in the years to come because there's a huge need out there. Next slide, please. So the core of our services is case management. So when folks arrive at our interim sites, they get an assessment, and that assessment leads to a case plan. And that case plan is meant to serve as kind of a Google map, if you will, to exit homelessness. Our staff are a blend of people with lived experience and academics on many of the shifts. And they work together to be role models, to be mentors, to set limits, and to assist our clientele in having a safe place to live and, again, exiting homelessness. We train about 35 graduate students a year in social work and in psychology. People working on their hours in graduate studies. And in that service, they provide mental health services at all of our sites. Those practicum students, interns, master's level students. And we have 5 licensed staff that work on my team that's super.
And Brian, you seem to have frozen on our side. Perhaps,
How about
great, thank you.
now?
Yes, go ahead.
So can we have the next? I don't know how much I lost, but Consuelo, but maybe we could have the next slide. So all of our facilities are operated 24/7, 365. The environment is one that is safe for even the most vulnerable client, for our volunteers, for our staff. It's not walking onto our sites, so that it's one in which people don't have to watch their back, where it's really a supportive community. Safety is the priority. Within the perimeter of our shelters, our interim housing sites, we focus on that community aspect, looking out for each other. Next slide, please. And finally, we, in a supportive community, we serve a diverse population. Almost 10% of our population are U.S. veterans. Our single adult interim housing sites tend to be older folks. The average age is over 50. They're people that suffer from chronic health conditions, diabetes, asthma, hypertension, obesity. We serve a lot of geriatric folks. The LGBTQ plus community is unfortunately overrepresented in the population experiencing homelessness. As I said, we serve many families, but this proposed site, I believe, would only serve adults, singles, and couples. I look forward to your questions, and I will pass this on to the next speaker. Oh, I'm sorry. We have one more slide. These are on the left is our Mountain View project, which was completed in 21. It's always full to capacity. There's 12 families with minor children and 88 singles, adults or couples. And then you can see on the right projects that are in the pre-construction or design phase. 2 of which we expect to be beginning construction in the next couple months. All of them have site control and have drawings already. Very excited about those. And the actually the Guadalupe project at the bottom near the San Jose Police Department, that program will be opening in about 8 or 10 weeks. It's almost near at completion.
Thank you, Brian, for that. I will talk a little bit about the site next. For context, for those of you that are not familiar, we are talking about this property on the corner of Lawrence Expressway and Benton, next to the church in Santa Clara. The county previously used this site as a roads property. The roads department has shared with us that they no longer have a need for the property. And in about 2014, the Board of Supervisors directed that any county land that is surplus or no longer needed for another county purpose be considered for housing, interim housing, permanent housing or interim housing. It is used as a tree lot during the holiday season. And we, as county staff, as I mentioned earlier, have identified the property as a potential site for safe parking or temporary shelter interim housing. To give you one more image, from the top, you will see this is what it looks like during the holidays as for Christmas tree. And then the image on the bottom shows you what it looks like when it's not in use for that. I think you've heard us say several times that we don't actually have a project defined just yet, but we did want to share with you what the target population and referral process could look like. Hopefully tonight we will learn more from you about what your needs are in the community. But essentially, city and county staff will be working together to develop a referral process that leverages our county's existing supportive housing system, while taking into consideration the needs that Adam mentioned about the unhoused population specifically in the city of Santa Clara. We do see that there is some alignment there between what the city is interested in doing, what the county is interested in doing, and have the opportunity to leverage existing systems and a partnership with Life Moves. So for instance, in the initial phases, we would develop an outreach strategy with service providers that serve the unhoused population in the city of Santa Clara, public safety teams, and the county outreach teams. And we would provide an early preference for people that have a connection with the city of Santa Clara. On the right is just an image of our supportive housing system. So you can see that we use coordinated assessment, and then we have this kind of emergency shelter interim housing. But we are jumping ahead. I wanted to move on to the estimated timeline. So you will see we're very early in this process. We're currently in the community engagement, and this includes community listening sessions, understanding from you as a community what the sentiment is around the proposed site, share with you the community vision and goals for the property that we have envisioned, and work with you to address any and mitigate any concerns, and provide you with updates through our website and through 2 community meetings that we will be hosting. And again, the intent is to invite you to shape what gets proposed on the site. Then in April, we will go to the City Council. Life Moves city and county staff will report back on the input that we received from you all, and have a conversation with the City Council about what they would like to do in terms of next steps. So here, we've laid out the possible next steps, assuming that the position at the time in April and the direction from the City Council is to continue to pursue the site. There will be some action that also needs to happen at the Board of Supervisors level. Again, a lot of this is contingent on the conclusion of our 3 community meetings and the recommendation that we make to the City Council for consideration. So the items and actions that have to happen after we complete the community engagement are subject to change. This is just to give you an idea of what the estimated timeline and process looks like, and then make sure that we're connecting that as we move along in the process. We will be moving into the input and Q&A session, but before we start to look at your Q&A and take those folks that have their hands raised, we have already received quite a bit of input and questions from the community members. And so we wanted to start with a few discussion questions that the panelists and myself can answer. And then we'll be working to make sure that these are posted on our website. So first question that we received, is this a done deal? It is not a done deal. Currently, we have direction from our board. We have direction from City Council. We have a desire from Life Moves to advance the site. And we want to hear from you. Following our community meetings, we will make a recommendation to the City Council. Where do I submit my thoughts about this proposal? In the next 2 slides, we will be providing you with contact for Life Moves if you're interested in learning about how they operate their sites and their service delivery model. If you're interested in talking to the city, we will provide you with Adam Marcus's email. And if you're interested in connecting with the county, I will be providing my email address. The next 2 questions are for the Life Moves team. Actually, I'm sorry. The third question, we're all going to chime in here, and that is, why are you considering interim housing and not permanent housing at this site? So I'll kick us off just again by referencing the board referral. For those of you that are not aware, the county has been actively pursuing the production of permanent housing. Over the last 5 years or so, we have in our pipeline now over 4,000 units of permanent housing, of which 2,700 are specifically for permanent supportive and rapid rehousing. There is a gap in our system for shelter beds. In fact, tonight there are over 100 people, if not more, that are waiting for shelter across the county. And I will first hand it to the city and see if anybody would like to chime in on that front.
I can add a little bit to that, Consuelo. Yeah, as you mentioned in previous slides, the city of Santa Clara already does have some supportive housing units already operating and more on the way in our pipeline. We also have a tenant-based rental assistance program, which is sort of a temporary assistance, but we don't have immediate shelter. And so when people call the city asking what to do, we really have to refer them out to other cities. And during these cold weather periods, those fill up pretty quickly. So we have been getting calls and people really having nowhere to go. And so if you think of housing as a sort of a ladder with rungs on it, similar to the supportive housing system, you do need that rung between, between being on the street and waiting for a permanent placement. And so having that temporary, shorter term opportunity is important.
Thank you, Adam. And why does Santa Clara need to provide interim housing?
Well, we've heard that people, it is difficult to travel across the county, and people are already here. There's, as you showed in your earlier slides, there's a fairly high number of people, some of which are affiliated with this with the city, some of which were counted in the one-time point in time count. And so we know that as those numbers go up, the demand for shelter here is enough to where having a shelter in Santa Clara, that's what the numbers show us. That's what the outreach and the input from all of our stakeholders who work day in, day out with unhoused residents. That's what we hear consistently, is there's a need for shelter here.
Thank you, Adam. And question number 5, how is this type of interim housing different than congregate settings? So I will call on Brian to kick off the response for the Life Moves team.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So every single adult or couple will have their own locked door, their own window, their own HVAC, a desk if they'd like it, storage space. And so people are more likely to move in and take advantage of the unit. Middle-class people value privacy, but the unsheltered folks value privacy as well. That's kind of a universal. So since the pandemic, we've developed only interim housing or non-congregate housing. And yeah, people will access it. They will come off the street and utilize it for a next step.
Thank you, Brian, for that. The next question, which I will also pivot to you, who will be allowed to stay at the potential interim housing site?
So, of course, people that will be prioritized will be people from the city itself, from Santa Clara itself. Referrals generally go through a coordinated entry system that prioritizes local folks, and it's basically for everyone that can be safe in an interim housing site. In Mountain View, once we open the one-day homeless count, the number of people living on the streets went down by about 50% once it was open. So we want to get those people living in vehicles, living in tents, living in parks, the people that spend their days at the library, so they have a place and a community of their own as they work on that next step.
Thank you, Brian. The next question, how will you prioritize unsheltered individuals from the city of Santa Clara? So perhaps I can kick this off by saying that unlike our permanent housing programs that are required to go through a specific order, so we manage a countywide list, we refer to that as the community queue, where we take referrals based on program eligibility. In the case of interim housing, we have the opportunity to partner with the host city to target and outreach specific areas in the city where we see more unsheltered individuals and kind of focus on that first. As the site continues to operate, then we do want to take people that are calling from the county's centralized hotline, but always keeping in mind if there's an opportunity to take people from the specific host city, that's our goal. And we have this very similar model in the city of Mountain View with the project that Brian mentioned, where we work very closely with the city of Mountain View to make that happen. And then obviously our priority is to make sure that no room or no bed is left unused. And so it's a balancing act, but we do work very closely with the city. Will people with a criminal background be permitted to stay in the interim housing? I'll kick it off just by saying that typically with interim housing, we do like to provide low barrier entry. But Brian, perhaps you can give us examples of what you do in other communities.
Yeah, so obviously nothing's been decided yet, but I certainly would hope that it would be open to people with criminal backgrounds. We'd rather have them under our supervision than in parks and libraries. We serve a lot of people re-entering from jail and other institutions, and they do really well. It's an important step to securing permanent housing. So although I don't think it's decided yet, I think the lower the barrier and the more people we can get off the street and away, basically, to be honest, out of the neighborhoods and away from the merchants, it's a plus for everyone.
Thank you, Brian. Will you provide 24/7 staff coverage?
Yeah, more than one person will be on duty 24/7, 365.
And are there rules and curfews for the people that will stay in the interim housing?
Yes, we have multiple rules, and I'm not certain that we've decided on a curfew. Most of our sites do have curfews. There are some that do not. That's negotiated with the city and the county and Life Moves. But there are multiple rules, all focused on safety and housing retention and the next step, right? It's all about, again, being safe for volunteers, for staff, for the people using the interim housing site.
Thank you, Brian. And will guests be allowed on site?
We generally, again, nothing has been decided. We generally allow guests in the public areas. For client safety, we generally discourage it from clients' rooms. And obviously, maybe not obviously, usually day hours.
Thank you. And one question that we often hear both when we're looking at interim housing and permanent housing is the fear of an increase in the number of calls for service. Oftentimes we hear that public safety is called to the site. Brian, can you share with us your experience at other sites and what you see and maybe things you do to mitigate those calls?
Yeah, well, let me say that during the day when many of our adults are out working, the facility looks kind of like a geriatric facility. There's a lot of canes, there's a lot of walkers, there's a lot of wheelchairs, and most of our calls for service are for medical help and not for law enforcement help. So yes, there will be an increase in calls for service, but this is a vulnerable, frail, generally older population suffering from chronic health conditions. So yes, there will be an increase in calls from service, and the vast majority of those will be from medical assistance. Although we will probably have a licensed vocational nurse on site, that person generally helps to coordinate primary and behavioral health care services rather than deliver them her or himself.
Thank you, Brian. And the last question we've heard is, assuming that this project moves forward, who would I contact to answer my questions? So again, from the county staff or the county side, you will be seeing my email in later slides. We also will be providing Adam Marcus's housing manager for the City of Santa Clara. And then we have a contact with Life Moves. Once the site, assuming the site moves forward and it is in operation, those are the questions that a new contact information would be provided then. Okay, and before we open the Q&A, I just wanted to provide a quick reminder of the ground rules as we move into the Q&A session of this meeting tonight. We are here until 7:30. We invite all of you to share your experiences, but please be respectful of each other's opinions. Please type your questions into the Q&A box or raise your hand. We will bounce between written questions and inviting people to unmute to ask their questions. I will take down the presentation and I will help facilitate the Q&A. And I think we are going to start with the folks that have their hands raised, because some of them have had their hands raised since we started. So Lorraine and Colleen, if you can please help me by unmuting Therese Cameron. Therese, go ahead and unmute.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Okay, great. I am concerned because I live on the other side of the street on Benton at Lawrence Expressway, right at the corner, Laurelwood Apartments. And I'm concerned about the safety of my apartment complex. Right now, we are full and we have got no parking. And to have this many new units put in means that you will need to have enough parking for 2 people per unit, because there's always going to be 2 cars. No matter where you go, there's always going to be 2 cars. And we need to make sure that if you're going to have this many units, you will need to have a parking garage or something, because otherwise they're going to try to come to my apartment complex and try to park in front of my apartment. And they're going to do that anyway. I know that, but this is not nice for me. I'm extremely uncomfortable with this. And my heart goes out to them when I see these people. I'm honest to God, I pray for them. But right at my apartment, I mean, you're right on the other side of my door. I mean, this is awful.
Thank you, Therese, for your comments. We will be capturing them. And just as a reminder, this is being recorded. So folks will be able to see and hear both the presentation and all of the comments. Thank you so much. Colleen and Lorraine, if you can help me unmute Vishal. Vishal, go ahead.
Hi, am I audible?
Yes.
Hi. Yeah, so I have the same concern. We as a neighbors, we strongly opposed to build a shelter in this specific site. For some reasons, right? This is not a vacant land. It is an amenity to the community. Church uses it every weekend for the overflow parking. And 3 months out of the year, this is our beloved pumpkin patch and the Christmas tree lot, right? So it's not an unwanted vacant land. Second thing is, if you look at the Life Move project in Mountain View, that's an industrial area, very narrow opening and very less street present, right? This is very next to Laurelwood Elementary, Pomeroy Elementary, Stratford, Monticello, park that my kids play, right? Santa Clara High School. So I would like to understand, right, that what thought process goes into selecting a space for building such facilities, right? I personally have been a faithful resident as well as a taxpayer of the Santa Clara City and the Santa Clara County. And yes, we talk about the safety and security of the homeless people, but what about safety and security for us who are living around, right? So the data that was presented here, it shows that the majority of the population that will be housed have physical or mental illness, right? And I would actually focus on the mental illness. The second thing is a drug addiction. Drug addiction is a major reason for homelessness, right? And if we are housing people with the mental disabilities and the drug addiction, where in the highly and densely populated areas near church, park, schools, and temples, we don't feel safe. Second thing is there is another homeless shelter being built right now, just 0.5 miles away, and we have not seen an impact on the community of that Bella Vista Inn shelter, right? So why one area being chosen to build two shelters on the two opposite ends, right? If I go left, I feel unsafe. I go right, I feel unsafe.
Thank you, Vishal, for your comments. I'm going to call the next person, Judy Hubbard. Judy, go ahead, please.
Judy, take yourself off mute, please.
I got it. Thank you. I want to know, I'm sure you guys did studies like the one over off of Barry S in San Jose where the Habitat for Humanity homes are built for individuals that are homeless. And I know that they share a community kitchen and I think they have a community bathroom. How is that working out? Do you know?
Thank you, Judy, for the question. What we're doing today is taking comments about what should be developed. Life Moves mentioned some examples. What they're considering here is that each individual would actually have their own restroom inside of their unit.
Okay.
And then the kitchen space has not been decided, hasn't been designed. In the city of San Jose, in one of their newer projects, they do have kitchenettes that they're proposing inside each of the units. It does add project costs, and there are some additional considerations on the operating costs. So those are some of the things we'd like to hear from you all as the team comes up with the development proposal.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Judy. We'll take one more question from raised hands, and then I'll switch over to the Q&A that were typed. Gavin. Can you unmute yourself, Gavin?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, I want to ask you, like, you already shared some info on like how many percentage the homeless has, but have you done any evaluation, like how many schools in walking distance in this area? Have you done it? Please answer me.
Thank you, Gavin, for the question. For the Life Moves team, do you have that information? On the county side, we do not.
We do not. Joe? I don't think we've.
Okay, Gavin, we will definitely get that information. And when we come back in person in March, we will make sure to have that information mapped
You
out.
will find out there are like more than 10 schools in this area within walking distance. And as you mentioned, maybe 90% of all these homeless maybe is drug related. And you never ever did any related like evaluation of that. And one more information is the builder. I don't know how you select this builder, but the builder, you know, Susan is the president. And the builder is the main donor to Susan's organization. So as the residents, I don't know why you mute everybody, why you mute the chat. We would love to see like every attendee of this community meeting. But the thing is, we do feel, you know, for this process of the decision, it is not correct. And I heard some voice from the residents. If you don't want to hear the residents, let me pass the words to you. The Santa Clara is not the old Santa Clara anymore. Like Kaiser, you mail to everyone. Like for this one, you email to like residents in the last minute. You already have 4-3 meetings. You didn't do any related like evaluation and research. You try to persuade us like how we should be caring, but who care us? Who protect the seniors, the students, and the safety of this community? And did you see the shelter built on Lawrence, not Lawrence, right? Only 0.5 mile away, less than 1 mile away, already sinks the community and you know, the business in Santa Clara. Just outside the street, the whole plaza, there is only one Paris, like but quick is survived there. You know, like for the whole city, I think we will suffer if you just try to squeeze in 3 homeless shelter here. Then maybe later, when they refer to Santa Clara City, that's well just a homeless shelter city. So no doubt, the real estate price will just you know. So I don't think that's a proper way to do the community meeting. And we can see today who joined this meeting, but I can like be very sure all our residents, most of them need more info, more evaluation based on data. You know, we are caring people. We also like care this homeless. We're willing to help. But when you do the decision, you couldn't only consider what's the most convenient way for you. You need to consider, you know, the kids, the seniors, the business of the city. Yeah, that's what I want to share with you. And please, please, don't disable chat and let us see each other, okay?
Thank you, Gavin, for that feedback. I did want to clarify that this is the first community meeting. We presented this at the City Council and do have 2 additional meetings planned to hear your voices. Those next 2 meetings will be in person and you will all have the opportunity to hear what each other has to say. This is the way that we set up our community engagement so that we use the Q&A function and others can see what questions are being asked. I'm going to pause on the raised hands and move over to some of the Q&A. Anonymous attendee wrote, has the county sold the property to Life Moves? The county is not proposing to sell the property. Currently, what's being considered is an opportunity to go out to do community engagement, see if there is appetite for this site here, and then we would go back to the City Council with the recommendation and then the respective Board of Supervisors. If this were to move forward, the county would not be selling the property. We would be leasing it to Life Moves or to the city. Anonymous attendee also wrote, it seems that this is a seminar to promote your project. This is not. It's very hard to design a community engagement strategy and meeting. We really are trying to hear from you before making a recommendation. and wanted to first introduce the opportunity and then give the team an opportunity to go back and design something that they can then share with you at the next meeting. Scrolling down. Please let us know how many residents are attending. The current count is 394. And I'm sorry, anonymous attendee also asked, would like the list of city/county sponsors on this project. If the person that asked the question can clarify what that means, we'd be happy to answer. Ben Hertzberg has asked, would you be willing to consider a different location? Can the community help you locate a more reasonable location? Absolutely, Ben. Again, for the community's consideration, first, what we're looking at is properties that are already owned by a government entity, so that we don't have to go and buy a piece of property in the open market. Otherwise, the majority of the funds go towards supporting an acquisition instead of supporting the construction. So if the community has a different site in mind, we would absolutely consider that. I'll take one more. Why does the shelter have to be built in the area full of elementary schools and residential houses? There are a bunch of other areas in Santa Clara that have less residential houses, schools, and apartments. We are deeply concerned with living close to a homeless shelter. So more of a comment and not a question. All right, I'm going to turn it back to the raised hands function. And can we please unmute Diane Harrison?
Hi, yes, I'm Diane Harrison, and my husband and I are both seniors. We live at Benton and Pomeroy, and we are both 100% in support of this plan. We think it's a great idea. There's a lot of need. I think it's a great location, being next to a church. A lot of people will probably possibly need, counseling or whatever, or just spiritual help. 7-Eleven is across the street. I would request one other thing that hasn't been mentioned is maybe a hawk signal at Flora Vista, perhaps. It's hard to get across the street there with the high-speed traffic coming from the Expressway. I mean, since we live so close to there, we go by there a lot. There are buses and shopping just a few blocks walk north, and more shopping and the Kaiser Hospital 2 blocks south. In other words, great location. And right now, as you mentioned, it's just a weedy lot, 10 months of the year, another month for pumpkins and trees. I think that those folks who want the places moved somewhere else, I think in any case, it should be both and, not either or. And it sounds like you've got a lot of locations. I was happy to see that. Pumpkins and trees, they're right now, we have them at the Moonlight Center, which is very close up on Kylie. They can be in other underutilized parking lots and possibly even some parks. You could put some pumpkins or trees in. And then some people are worried about schools. I'm thinking the poor people who are poor are not inherently dangerous. And I think that is something that I hear a lot from those who really don't want to see poor people in their neighborhood. My experience with that, poor people really are on average nicer than rich people. So I am happy to have them in my neighborhood. I want them in our neighborhood, and I want to help them get housing. So that's my comments.
Thank you, Diane. We will move on to Jacob. Jacob, can you unmute yourself?
Yes, thanks. I wanted just to respond to the poor people comments just now. We're not concerned about poor people. We are willing to help poor people, but we are concerned with people with drug addicts and also mental health problems. That's the concern. This community has so many schools, have so many young children and seniors, and we enjoy this community so much. We love it, and we love to help poor people. But the concern is the safety. How should we make sure that the homeless people with mental problems and with drug addicts, what if they turn this shelter into a drug hotspot? that is the hotbed for crimes. And have you counted how many children walking through the street to their schools every morning? They will pass this site every day. How would you protect the young children going to the elementary school, going to the high school? I see them every day. I'm concerned. I'm also a father of young children. So I want to make sure that the city will take concern of these voices in making decisions. And I also want to comment on the previous person's comment. I think her name is Gavin. This is not right way to set up a meeting like this. We only see you, you control the screen, you control the voice. And and thank you for giving me the opportunity for my voice. But we should be more open, welcome to all voices, let people see each other, let people to hear each other, to discuss this topic. We want to help, but we want to find an alternative way to help them rather than putting two shelters in the same neighborhood with so many people concerned about the safety and the crimes.
Thank you, Jacob, for the feedback. I did want to clarify for our attendees that the site being mentioned, the Bella Vista site, while it is serving as interim housing for a few years, it is going to be permanent housing in the long term. The developer is working on the schedule for the permanent side. We'd be happy to provide that information. And I say that because, when we started, we talked about the need for more interim housing in the city of Santa Clara. And so again, while we only have that Bella Vista site for a year, maybe two, it is not going to provide that long-term need that we have in the city for interim housing. I'll take one more of the raised hands and go to the Q&A. Ashish, can you please unmute?
Sure. Thank you for giving the opportunity. I'll start with saying the heart seems to be in the right place, right? So please don't get us wrong. Like it is a very complex problem that you're trying to help, solve or get better, right? So please take this feedback as like just constructive feedback as concerned citizens. I'm also a father of young children, and I'm really concerned about the safety and security of my family, my neighborhood, my community, and Santa Clara in general. Like, what are we going to turn this city into and this neighborhood into? My, first thing was like, have we done the study about the impact of such a shelter in the adjacent communities? What the heck happens once it happens over there? Take a look at San Francisco, where it has been there for quite some time. What happened over there? Like first learn from that. And I'm very pleased to hear you say a few times that safety is your number one concern, but you only mentioned your clients, your volunteers. You never even once mentioned neighborhoods. We are most concerned about the neighborhood. What steps will be taken? One or two staff members do not suffice to make sure that nothing bad is coming out of that pocket that affects the adjacent communities. That is the concern. Like, so if anything else, I think safety of the neighborhood is the biggest concern. And I would love to know what other options were evaluated as potential sites, especially away from schools and established single family communities, if any. And has there been any study on the impact to residents with such shelters? The example was San Francisco. And like eventually, like how does this improve the quality of life for residents who are in proximity? I heard like some of the neighbors who live very close, mention about possible deterioration of their quality of life. Like, what is the impact of those? These are also like important tax-paying individuals for Santa Clara. If the quality of life deteriorates, like similar to a lot of people who move to further suburbs, these will also leave. That revenue will go away from Santa Clara. Maybe you don't care. Maybe you want single family homes to actually move away. But if we really care about the community, we should, hold ourselves responsible that whether or not the shelter deteriorates the quality of life. And if it does, who should we, the people, hold responsible? Because we have been saying, like, quite a bit about that, we are concerned about the safety. If someone is overriding us, like despite all of this, and it goes on, and later on this becomes, a city that is invested with drugs, or a community which gets, those kind of incidents even more, we still get plagued by vandalism. There was one night in which within our neighborhood 25 cars were broken into, not too long back. And imagine like our fear when we hear about things like that. There is a reason why we are afraid. The city we are seeing is not investing in local infrastructure, like filling up the potholes on major roads like Lawrence. Our safety, even right now, is not perfect, let alone be, not even decent, let alone be perfect. And when we hear this, so please understand, this is coming from a place of we want to live in this community. We want to make it better. We are already suffering. And this is like a straw on the camel's back at this time. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Ashish. Given that we only have about 25 minutes left, we're going to prioritize those that have their hands raised. We will be saving all of the Q&A answers that folks have typed in, and we will be posting that on the website in the next week or so. So we're going to move on to Sanjeev. And folks, there are 37 people with their hands raised. So if we can be mindful so that we can get everybody's comments. Otherwise, again, we will be having an in-person meeting in March. Go ahead, Sanjeev.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the opportunity. And definitely want, echo Ashish's sentiment that, your intentions are very honorable and, you're trying to do the right thing. No question about that. But I think, there are some nuances to this, right? So we are fully supportive of like low income housing on a more permanent basis, because once residents live in a place for a longer period of time, they're also incentivized to be more cooperative and more, engage more with the community and, work for the collective good. But when you have a transient population, and especially the one that's described as, more than half being drug addicts, for example, that is concerning. So that's the first part. And the second part is, it hasn't been clear yet. It was also concerning that, when the question was asked that, how many schools are in the walking vicinity, and no one really had an answer for this. So that seems to suggest that not much research was done while evaluating this specific location. And to take it even further, right? I do support even homeless shelters, just as long as we pick a better location where they're placed, especially after the COVID pandemic, we don't have a shortage of locations where businesses have been shuttered. A lot of industrial areas have vacant lots or vacant properties. They're perfectly good candidates to be acquired, at a low market price, given the economic conditions over there. And, I'm sure the people here are more than supportive of such efforts. So we are not against poor people. We're not against homeless people. We're not against anyone, really. We just want to make sure that everyone's interests are accounted for, and especially the local community, so that they can, so once the local community feels safe and secure, they will feel better and more engaged to support your other efforts as well.
Thank you, Sanjeev.
Thank you.
Thank you. Eva Sun. Go ahead, Eva.
Hi, thank you. I want to echo the previous, like Ashish, Gavin, Sanjeev's points. Like, I just take a look at the elementary schools, and within 1 mile, there are so many: Palmery Elementary, Peterson Middle School, Barrett Elementary School, Stratford and Elementary School, Laura Wood Elementary School. So many schools over there. And I'd like just to people do some research and give us some data support saying that, okay, after building a shelter, there won't be any negative impact on the health and lives of the residents over here. If you can provide that data and persuade us and respect all of us opinions, we'll support. Thank you.
Thank you.
But now I don't support. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll make sure to bring that information and share with you the steps that we took to identify. Cindy? Go ahead, Cindy.
Yeah, thank you for giving me the opportunity. So I agree with all of the above mentioned concerns for the safety and especially the safety for the children and the seniors. And also I think it's become pretty clear and obvious that this proposal doesn't take into consideration the concern of the neighborhood. So I wish for the following two meetings, you either provide more data-driven and also statistics of the solidarity of this project, or we should consider some other places to make this like a better and a more sustainable proposal. I want to add in another perspective on this because I have been working as a volunteer for shelter, not in the California, but in Texas when I were a PhD student. And also I also interviewed as a journalism student at that time, interviewed homeless people and also watched quite a lot of documentary about the homeless people. So there are some findings actually I find is quite against what Dr. Greenberg's observation or hypothesis. Because first thing is when I volunteered in the shelter is the safety and also the healthiness, also cleanness of the shelter is really a concern. So people there, not many, to be honest, not many really people in need would live there. So many people, they are in need, they don't want to go to the shelter for several reasons. First, the shelter is full of people with drugs and also with crime history. They don't want to identify them together with those kinds of people. So that's why they'd rather sleep on the street than going to the shelter. Because, and then as a consequence, the shelter becomes a worse place because people who really need, they don't want to go, but only people like having the similar habits, they will go there. So I think this might not really serve the hypothesis that also the goodwill, like we don't really want to build those shelter. So I think another layer to that is we might need to do a better screening and rethink really about those solutions. Are these really the best solutions for the people? How can we really help those people? And also, I believe if you, also Dr. Greenberg, I believe if you are an expert in like moving out those shelters, you should have seen like a documentary, I think recently, interviewing 5 different families across the US about the homeless people. And one family with a little girl, they lived in the shelter. They had lived in the shelter in San Francisco. And she specifically said she never wants to go to the shelter anymore because she never dared to go to the toilet or the restroom by her own at night because there are just so many people that she concerned, her family concerned her safety as well. So
thank you, Cindy.
Thank you.
And just for clarification on that last note, we'll clarify that at the next meeting so that we can describe the actual proposed project. Linda, please go ahead.
Hi, yeah, thanks for giving me the opportunity. I do share the same concern that many people had already spoke. And I'm wondering that I also speak with a lot of neighborhood and residents during the past weekend. And most of the people are concerned and unhappy with this proposal. I'm just wondering, given the majority of the community is against this proposal and the feeling that people have, would that even benefit anyone if it did come through and make the shelters? Will the people living in the homeless shelters get along with the people in the neighborhood? Yeah, that's my one question. The other one is that I'm also concerning for the location we choose. So as we already know that the space is very close to the Benton and Lawrence, which Lawrence is the main road with a lot of traffic and high-speed cars. And they also mentioned in the note that 57 people are with physical or mental issues. How do you guarantee that people with mental issues will not get hurt themselves when living next to the the main road with a lot of traffics? Yeah.
Thank you for those comments. Next, we're going to move on to EW. EW, go ahead.
Yes, hi.
Thanks for providing me the opportunity. So I do share the same concern, especially after the Dr. Greenberg mentioned this is a low entry barrier. So we do have some safety concern here. And so I also don't understand, even Councilor, you mentioned that the Bella Vista one will be converted to the permanent one, but still we will have a 2 homeless or in the same neighborhood, and which is half mile away. So to the neighborhood, to the business, and also to the residents here. Yeah. So I think you do need to consider this, because right now the middle class who living in the City of Santa Clara, we already take a lot of pressure. You know, the house price here in Santa Clara is not cheap. So we are working so hard to maintain our house and to pay the mortgage here. And we do really want to live here and to improve the life quality and improve the neighborhood. But if you put another shelter here, so this is really damage a lot of things. And I do also share the concern from other people. So a lot of young kids are living here. And so more than 10 different schools are in this neighborhood. And one more thing is the pumpkin patch. Actually, a lot of Silicon Valley kids love this pumpkin patch. They have a good memory of this. So if you build the shelter here, the kids will lose their place to celebrate the Halloween. Yeah. And we want to help the homeless people, but to choose another way, which is a better way. Thank you.
Thank you, EW. I'm going to move to Manish.
Hello, can you hear me?
If you can speak up a little bit, that would be great.
Can you hear me now?
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Love the initiative. I'm glad we are looking into this problem, but it's very concerning listening to the presentation from you, Dr. Greenberg, on not having answers to very basic questions like nobody's looked into the safety of the children or safety of the community. And it's a decision that seems to have been taken in an isolation to just fulfill the needs of your immediate project, but not the community per se in general. So I echo the sentiments of everyone who's voicing that. That's number one. And it seemed like this was originally dressed as a low-income community for families, but it's more for a slightly different demographics, which has a pretty big impact on the community around us. One thing that has probably not come up as much is who is funding for added support for mental health support or for violence control or traffic management or just general increased need for law and order, which there are a lot of studies out there which you can refer to is a need in a community when something like this is introduced. How would that be funded, or would it just be left on its own to be funded, which is what ends up happening in a lot of communities, which is where these concerns are also coming from. These projects come up, but then the necessary infrastructure to support that is not funded, which is very alarming, right? And again, just to reiterate my point, it is very, very concerning that basic research of the area, the impact on the children who walk there to their schools, just the basic knowledge that how many schools are even in that area has not been conducted before making this decision. So I think this is a very poorly made, uninformed decision. Can't say that any more clearly. But I think I echo the sentiments of a lot of people who we've talked to over the last several days. I'll rest my comment here. Thank you.
Thank you. Ken?
Hi. Thanks for giving me the opportunity. I did post in the Q&A, and I'm sorry for that. As a resident of the Pomeroy West condominium on the corner of Pomeroy and Benton, I would like to go on record saying that I'm thoroughly opposed to this project. I know it smacks of NIMBYism, but and not everyone agrees with me, but I can't believe that there aren't more suitable locations for this facility in the whole of Santa Clara County. the current proposal places the project much too close to residents, businesses, and schools. I'm already being panhandled on a daily basis at Walgreens, every 7-Eleven, Safeway, the dollar store, and busy intersections at a stoplight. Locating a homeless shelter at the corner of Lawrence and Benton will only compound the problem. I think there will also be a negative impact on property values in the area, a probable increase in crime, and the exposure of drug-using mentally ill individuals to school children. There's already a Covenant House and Bill Wilson Center in this area providing services to the unhoused, not to mention 4 Life Move facilities in Santa Clara County. I believe there is also a converted motel on El Camino that serves as a small shelter, and we've already talked about the transformation of the Bella Vista Inn. I realize there's no easy solutions to the homeless crisis, but the true irony of the situation is that the people who need help the most, the mentally ill and the drug addicted, are the most resistant to these social services. The proposed facility at the corner of Lawrence and Benton is not needed, not wanted, and not practical for the residents of this community. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. We will move on to Melinda. And we have 27 others with their raised hand. Thank you. Melinda, go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Elisa. I'm sharing the screen with my mom. I'm 27 years old, and we are strongly in favor of this proposal. Empathy and compassion are important regardless of differences we have with people, and this would be a fantastic use of space. Several years ago, I had a friend who was unhoused here in Santa Clara. I met him while we were both in the hospital undergoing treatment for mental health services. The only difference between the two of us was that I had the privilege of a supportive family that had an available bed, and he did not. Mental health should never be a barrier for access to basic human rights. I would challenge you to find a group of 10 people and find even one that does not have some sort of mental health condition. You already have neighbors who have depression, bipolar, OCD, schizophrenia, BPD, and substance abuse conditions. Giving people a place to sleep at night will improve their mental health and provide additional resources for those who need it. My friend spent his days at the library or the park and his evenings running around trying to find a sheltered place to sleep at night. He stood in lines, he slept on yoga mats, and he even slept in my own car. He wanted to spend his time applying for jobs, but he was unable to because those employers required an address on their application forms and later on to register for benefits of employment. Having even temporary addresses can be the difference between employment and therefore income and the ability to support themselves or staying on the streets. Also, as far as concerns about residents with criminal records, I have several friends who also have criminal records. Friends that have DUIs, friends that got into something they shouldn't have in college, and even a good friend who was in prison for 17 years. That specific friend is one of the kindest, smartest, most empathetic people I know. Criminals are not inherently bad people, and all people are capable of recovery and growth. Additionally, if a person is actively seeking out housing in a project like this, that they are trying to help themselves and better their situations. As their neighbors, we should support and encourage people who are trying to better themselves. We think that this is a fantastic use of space that is generally unused. It's essentially walking distance to the library, multiple parks, a church, grocery stores, convenience stores, making it an ideal location for someone who does not have other means of transportation. In conclusion, my mom and I are very strongly in favor of this project. We would be thrilled to know that this is where our tax dollars are going, as we want to be able to help people. We would be proud to be part of a city that takes care of its own. Thank you.
Thank you for that. The next speaker, Bill, can we please unmute Bill? Go ahead, Bill.
Oh, hi. Yeah, my name is Bill. Yeah, I also wanted to voice like my strong support for this project. You know, my wife is a school teacher, and then I have 2 small children. One attends Laurelwood Elementary, and like, again, we just feel like this is actually a really good community for housing, and we're excited to see low-income housing and interim housing being built. And then the other suggestion I had, you know, I was at the school board meeting last week, and they have a 2-minute time limit for comments, and I think you guys might consider something like that. anyways, and then my question was just as you know, a resident who is excited and wanted to show support, I just want to know, like, what are other ways that we could show support for this project, or how as a community we could welcome this project and make sure it's successful and safe for everyone.
Thank you. Next we have John. Go ahead, John.
Hello, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. I did work for a company that is next door to the shelter that was built in Mountain View. And I worked there since 1999. And after that shelter went in, there was increased problem with alcohol bottles left everywhere, people in the company parking lots drinking. There was no parking on the streets, and they actually had to hire security to keep things from disappearing in the parking lot, like the basketball hoop and things of that nature. That's in an industrial area. I can't imagine how this would affect people in a residential area. You know, these people are going to be out during the day and they're going to go somewhere. How are you going to provide some kind of way to keep this from happening in our neighborhoods? That's it.
Thank you, John. Next we have Mudita. Go ahead.
Yeah, hi. I wanted to basically also oppose it very strongly. I think it's alarming to hear that in this really expensive neighborhood, there are $2 million houses here, and you're saying you can't get a better return on investment in finding another lot somewhere. I mean, I just cannot understand how that is possible. You would in fact get a much better return on investment to buy a property somewhere else, which has much cheaper real estate than this area and is more suited for it. The other thing I want to say is, if you really look around, this is an area where a lot of immigrants are moving in and both the parents are working. When I was working I have two daughters. My older one, when she started going to middle school, she would have to walk home alone. And just knowing that the neighborhood is safe, you know, gave me many sleepless nights. Like, in spite of that, I had so many sleepless nights, just imagining that my daughter would be coming home alone by herself. And over the years, I have gotten more comfortable with the neighborhood. I felt like, okay, you know, I know it, I feel it. But I mean, this is just absurd that we are converting Santa Clara into a neighborhood which families are not going to consider safe for themselves. Working parents, they are highly invested in the safety of their kids and of their parents. Safety is the number one concern of a community. And if we want to make Santa Clara be that place where local businesses don't thrive because, you know, families are moving away, they don't consider it safe. Like, I really don't see the benefit in it. Like, we want to help homeless. Nobody's saying that we are against, you know, poor people, like how somebody else was saying. It's not about that. It's about the mental instability and drugs. And leaving our young kids, a very populated young kid neighborhood, you know, making that vulnerable. So I just, I'm really, I hope you guys listen and do something about it, because what you might not realize is that in a matter of 5 years, 7 years, the landscape will change. People will not move here. To buy, you know, the property prices that are here in this area, people are not going to compromise on safety of their kids. And it's going to become a very different place. Maybe 10 years, whatever you're thinking, but I can tell you it's going to go fast, because for immigrants, and especially for so many Asians that are there literally in the call, I'm noticing how many are Asian names. You know why somebody moves from another country to the US is for providing a better living to their families and to be safe. And mental instability is not something you can joke around with immigrants. You know, you see how much crime is happening in schools all over the US with older population.
Thank you, Mudita.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thanks.
Next we have David. Go ahead, David. David, can you unmute yourself?
Oops, sorry, I was double muted. Can you hear me?
No worries. Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So just a couple of things, not to belittle other points. I don't know if you're aware, but the corner of Lawrence Expressway and El Camino has been under massive property development for some time now. One corner has already been massively developed into a 6-story complex. The other corner is where the Bella Vista site is, which is already being turned into a shelter, which seems to be oversaturating homeless support in our neighborhood, which seems to be difficult. And then the other 2 corners are also being actively planned for major development too. So it seems like Birdland neighborhood is really becoming a dumping ground here for some of Santa Clara's unwanted projects. The other things that I have, the difficult thing, and I want to reiterate, that corner of Lawrence and Expressway is extremely dangerous. There's a lot of high-speed traffic at that corner. There is no access off of Lawrence. It has to be off of Benton. It's a very odd shape. It would be very difficult to access. And then ultimately, there is no services in this area. Yes, there is Kaiser Hospital, but beyond that, there's no other services. I wouldn't understand why it wouldn't be better suited to be something around, say, the police station, City Hall, 49er Stadium, other places that have services. And to the other lady's point, I agree, property prices here are very expensive. That's a very expensive parcel, which would probably be better suited for others' purposes, to get it around to other people and maybe distribute this. I get it, homeless is a real difficult situation, but not to put it all in one place like this. This is a bit unfair for our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you, David. We're going to take just one more raised hand, and then we will share with you the next steps. MC, can you please unmute?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Why are you guys picking and choosing which questions to answer? I see you brushing off a whole bunch of questions. Would you be answering all these questions at a later time, or you're just going to ignore those questions?
Yes, MC, I was trying to go through the list and get some of the questions answered now while folks were chiming in, but we will be posting every single question. Just to give you a sense, there are 324 open questions. And I have answered 18 of them, either answered live or I typed in a response. Both the open and the answered questions will be posted.
Yeah, and then the way you are running it, I feel that it's not being done in good faith. You are just skipping all the questions. I mean, whoever it is for or against doesn't matter, but at least you should actually be answering all the questions, right? We are paying taxes. We are actually paying you. You should be accountable MC, for us, yes, right?
Absolutely, MC. We're trying to manage the questions and we're only answering those that have a relatively short answer. When we come back for meeting number 2, we will have more opportunity to hear from everybody and answer the questions.
Yeah, I mean, people are asking basic questions. What was the research that was done? No answer.
MC,
why is that?
If you have comments to share, please go ahead. Otherwise, we will give Tim the opportunity to chime in.
Sure.
Thank you. Tim, go ahead.
Hello.
Hi, Tim, go ahead.
Okay, so I think my question is mostly related to, maybe I was wrong, but I heard that there's going to be at least one staff. There's 80 to 120 units there. How can one staff be able to hold, people who possibly has mental issues, has criminal records, might have violence background? How do people, how do this one staff handle all these people, right? The other thing is, how about people who has other records like pedophilia, right? We have 5 elementary schools, as I can find, like in these areas, right? You have countless home base, and also there's kindercare here, those daycares. I think, honestly, I'm a little bit disappointed that no research has been done to an area that has so many kids. And then you're building 80 to 120 units with only one staff at all time. So I hope that these kind of questions can be answered. The other thing I want to, talk about, I heard the other, lady, she has experience with people who are unfortunately homeless. I also had grad school like friends who were homeless at one point because they were illegal immigrant. I sympathize with those people, and to be honest, I don't mind at all supporting them. But the problem right now we're talking about is not them. The thing that we're talking about is people who has mental illness, criminal records, possible violence background. We're not talking about people who try really hard to get out of the situation, at least not right now. So somebody has to help them getting out of the situation before you can talk about integrating them back to the society. Leave alone having this kind of people around all the kids that can be traumatized if something happens. And then let me ask you, what kind of management company will be responsible for this if some kids were traumatized by these people? Firing the management company is not the answer because the kids can be traumatized for life. And I have witnessed a situation like that when I was young. I resonate with the other lady who talked about immigrant countries and stuff. Yes, I have seen this happen before. And then part of the reason, yes, when an immigrant to this country is to be safe. So I know that there are a lot of good people out there who are homeless because unfortunate situations, but I have also witnessed situation that's the other way. So that's my comments.
Thank you. And apologies to the rest of the folks. We are out of time. I'm going to share my screen one more time to talk about the next steps. And if the team can confirm that they can see my screen. Great, thank you. First of all, we wanted to thank everybody who was in attendance tonight. At the very peak, we had 396 people in attendance, not including 10 of the panelists, which includes city, county staff, and members of Life Moves team. So thank you so much for your comments, and we appreciate the feedback on the style of the meeting. We always do try to change the way that we engage with the community. So here on the page, what you will see is we recommend that you sign up for the mailing list. If you go to the project website, at the bottom of the page, there is a location for you to add your name. As of this afternoon, we had 75 people that had signed up to receive those updates. We will be sending an email through that list to keep you posted, let you know when things are updated on the website. I've mentioned a couple of times that we will be hosting upcoming community meetings, and I wanted to clarify again that a decision has not been made. A property has been identified. The City Council and the Board of Supervisors have asked that we create a space for community engagement. Based on all of the engagement, the proposal presentation, then we will come together and make a recommendation to the City Council, at which point, depending on what that recommendation is, you will have an opportunity to provide feedback, not only at the upcoming community meetings, but at a future City Council and or Board of Supervisors meeting. The next meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, March 1st at 6 p.m. The meeting again will be in person. We will be meeting at the Mission City Church. The address is posted here. We also, if you live 1,000 feet within the property, you will be receiving a postcard in the mail. And the city and county team will be taking every effort to share information about the upcoming meetings through social media and through other ways that you currently receive information about upcoming city meetings. The third meeting will be held on Thursday, March 9th at 6 p.m., same location. We also encourage you to email us your questions and feedback to help us be great neighbors. Again, assuming if this project moves forward or in the future, if another site is identified, we always want to do better. And if there are things that we're not considering up front, we want to hear that. The project website is here. Again, the Life Moves contact is mjackson@lifemoves.org. To contact the county, you can reach out to me. That is my personal email. Or if you want have some questions for the city team, Adam Marcus's email is posted here. Thank you again for joining us tonight. One more time, and this is the project website. Thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you in March.